This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
Now being brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. They do a great job of making sure, A, you're fully insured, because we have a multitude of insurance needs. Keeping it organized and doing what they can to save you money, because customer service means everything to them. At Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury, go to purdyinsurance.com. Very pleased to be joined by, without question, at least in my opinion, one of the best in the business. Somebody that when you talk to a broadcasting class, you talk about standards, and Adam Rittenberg meets all those standards. Adam, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the kind words. I missed you down in Florida, but it was a heck of a game, obviously.
It was a heck of a game. And, look, Notre Dame is a team. There's a couple areas I want to get into with them. One, they have been – when you go this long, and this will be game 16 for them coming up, Penn State played 16, attrition becomes an issue. What has allowed Notre Dame to overcome attrition issues, because people don't realize what a banged-up football team they've been?
It's really been remarkable. Al Golden told me even mid-season, or towards the end of the season, that he'd never seen anything like it in terms of the number of key injuries and then their ability to overcome them. Whether it's star players like Benjamin Morrison or role players, like a couple of defensive linemen that they lost, early. I think part of it, Steve, and this is sort of a larger conversation, is, losing a game early on, I really think served Notre Dame well. And as one of their linebackers, Jack Kaiser, told me, it was like they were at the bottom. They were at the bottom of the bowl, he called it. And I think that helped them with whatever came next. And unfortunately for them, it was a number of injuries. They lost an offensive lineman before the year, but a lot of the injuries started piling up right after that Northern Illinois loss, and they never really stopped. I mean, even going into the championship game, they're going to have to shuffle their offensive line a bit, and playing without a number of defensive starters. So it's just become the norm. Credit to their depth, their leadership, their coaches. A lot of different people involved, but it is unusual because most teams, given the number of key players they would have lost by now, would not be in this position.
Right, and no question. In fact, I really felt like after the Northern Illinois game, I felt like every game after that was a playoff game for them, because I just didn't feel like they could afford a second loss. Did you look at it that way, or was there a different viewpoint?
No, I'm with you, because they didn't have the benefit of a conference championship game, and the only way they're getting in with the system is being an at-large. I really think, in hindsight, Steve, like Oregon would have benefited from losing. As a team that came into the conference and ran the table and won the league, it was almost too easy. And I think you look at both of the teams that are playing for the national title. They lost games, and they were able to bounce back from that. And you even see Penn State, the way that they performed after losing to Ohio State or losing in the Big Ten championship game. I think you kind of need that the way that this format is set up. And I think both of these teams, to their credit, have used those setbacks as a way to then move forward. Whereas obviously Oregon, their only loss was one that knocked them out.
A key for both Notre Dame and Ohio State, which is something Penn State is going through this week, is that I felt that the money, we talk about money all the time, okay, NIL, now, of course, the new money from the House settlement that'll be coming in. But I felt like Notre Dame and Ohio State were two schools that used whatever NIL they had, where roster retention was so critical to them to go with then transfers. Did you see it the same way? Because Penn State's going through that this week. They got a lot of guys coming back.
No doubt. I think there's a misconception, not by you, but by others around Ohio State, that they spent all this money on transfers. And it was really they spent all this money to keep guys that normally would have gone to the NFL or to other programs on the team. So it's very much a retention approach. And then they added guys like Quinshon Judkins and Caleb Downs from the SEC that have helped. And then you're right, very similar with Penn State. Now they're keeping their top guys, and then we'll see who else they can add from the portal. I still think they need a little bit of help at wide receiver and some other positions. But yeah, it's really important when you have a good team and you have guys that are maybe on the fence. I mean, who would have thought Nicholas Singleton, with what he did in the playoff, would even consider coming back to Penn State at the position he plays? But because they have money and they have a commitment to him, and obviously other players around him, he made that decision.
Yeah, because of the roster retention part. Notre Dame was the same way. Xavier Watts, they were able to get him to come back. There's a list of guys as well. But that's the part of all this I think gets lost, because when they hear a Caleb Downs is getting it, I heard the figure. I'm not going to get into it. But they think that's the big one. Well, why do you think JTT's still there? Why is Sawyer still there? Why is Igbuka still there? Why is Travion Henderson still there? Roster retention.
Right, and it'll be interesting to see. I still think, Steve, that this will be the Ohio State team that has the most fourth-year players on it. I just don't think we're going to see that in most years at a place like that. But I think we're going to see more of them because, you can obviously go to the NFL and get your first contract, or you can stay at Ohio State and make a lot of money and then go to the NFL. And I think for guys like, JTT and Jack Sawyer, who had been quite frankly, a little disappointing in their careers. This obviously worked out really well, and it worked out for Emeka Egbuka and Travion Henderson. So this is the new college football, and where staying is sometimes a good thing, and not just rushing to the NFL the first chance that you get.
While I was up doing the post-game show, you were down with the players after the Orange Bowl and the interview room, the media conferences, and so forth. Drew Allar, of course, it's the only interception he threw in the postseason. The only one, but it's the one everybody remembers. What was your impression of his reaction to it when he got into the media room?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a tough scene, right? And the way that the Orange Bowl or the Hard Rock Stadium is built, you have the two locker rooms in the same part of the stadium, and so Penn State actually had to cross through the Notre Dame players and coaches going to their locker room on the way to the media room. So it's just a tough moment because you're seeing these guys coming in celebrating, and you got to go talk about your interception and the fact that you fell just short of making the national championship game. So I felt really bad for Drew. It was just a tough night. You probably saw it and commented on the broadcast that he just didn't look right from the start. Just a step off, maybe a little too hyped up. He makes that pass to Nicholas Singleton on the touchdown, 99 times out of 100, but he didn't that night. And so there just was something that wasn't right with him, and unfortunately he makes that mistake there at the end, and it ends up costing them a chance to at least get to overtime.
Right. No, it was no question tough. I've been telling people, and again, this will be on my opinion side, the NCAA basketball tournament, I think, has given college football a guideline. And I don't mean just the tournament. I'm talking about early signing period in November, the way they do the tournament, go 1 through 68. They don't have the top four conference champions be the number one seeds. Is that something college football needs to look at?
Well, I think so. It just doesn't look right when Oregon does everything that's asked of it, and yet they get the toughest matchup in the quarterfinal with Ohio State. And obviously, if Ohio State had beaten Michigan, those teams would have met in the Big Ten championship game, and maybe the whole seeding conversation would be a little bit different. But I think we're going to see something eventually where the seeding is just going to be straight up, and then maybe it's something where conference champions who aren't in the top four will be guaranteed a home game in the campus site round, or some type of reseeding after the first round. It just it didn't look right. It didn't feel right. Yeah, but again, I also look at it this way: Oregon would have had to have beaten Ohio State eventually, and they obviously weren't up to the task when those two teams met.
How do you view Monday night?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think Notre Dame has been, like we talked about, so resilient and been able to stay in games. I thought Penn State was more talented than they were, and yet they were obviously able to win that game. Can they do it again? They're going to need Ohio State to make mistakes. I really felt that if Ohio State had lost to Texas, it would have been much, much more about Ohio State and not so much about Texas because of the mistakes that they made to kill drives and so forth. And so I think that's what it's going to take. There's probably a scenario here where Notre Dame is just out of gas, and that the more talented team is going to win and maybe win convincingly. But I just have seen this Notre Dame team come back from so many different things over the course of the season that I'm not going to doubt them. And I think Marcus will have them ready to go, and they have really good coaching, and they handle situations well. And if they can get this game into the fourth quarter, they're going to have a really good opportunity to win. But let's face it, Ohio State has the most talent. They had the most talent coming into the season of anyone, and now they're playing like it.
This is the first time we've done the 12. You've covered many of the fours. In fact, I think you've covered all the fours. Now you've gone through this format and the bouncing all over the country to do it. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I like it. I know there's some challenges for fans, financially,
yes,
to be able to go to all these games, and that's hard. I absolutely love the campus round, and it's something that I've wanted forever because that's where I grew up watching college football and really connecting to the sport was when it was on campus, not when it was at some bowl site or even worse, some NFL stadium. So I love that. And, I think there's really a story to tell in the playoff. The teams, especially now that these two that have been in they're worked their way and won 3 games to get to this point. It's the second season, whereas the previous model, it was just so short that it was hard to really, remember it. And I think we're going to remember these playoff and some of the moments that have come up, even for teams that didn't win a single game. There are just so many more highlights and just memorable just instances throughout the entire playoff that we can look back at, which wasn't really there in the previous system.
The other part, too, is now, and I'm going to take it from a different perspective because you've had to go to cover these games, but Penn State practiced here most of the time and then went, I don't know, let's pick a number, about 48 hours before the game. I think for the teams, that part worked out really well. And to be honest with you, for the bowl committees, it probably worked out for great. They didn't have to plan some trip to SeaWorld.
Right, although I guess the flip side of that is like when your only event of the year is this, and and you only have 2 or 3 days versus I think the bowl committees really love all the hoopla and the lead up, and we all remember like the Lowry's Beef Bowl at the Rose Bowl. I mean, those things are gone. Like that is just not part of the sport anymore, and that these trips, other than the quarterfinal trips, are relatively 48-hour, 72-hour deals, and so it's not necessarily that same type of quote unquote reward, but the reward is you're playing for a national championship, and you get to be with your teammates and your coaches and striving for a goal at a really exciting time of year. So it's just a little bit different experience. I mean, you do feel a little bad for the teams that lost in the first round because they didn't get any sort of bowl experience. They just got a road loss in these cases. But, I think players enjoy the fact that there's more opportunity to try to achieve the top goal, which is the national championship.
What's interesting, Adam, I just, on the practice field, just side talk. And I asked him about, because at this point Penn State had gone from the Fiesta Bowl, they're going to go to the Orange Bowl. And they said, each one said, if we had to spend a week in Scottsdale and then come right back and spend a week in Miami, they said that would have been tough for them to do. They actually liked the fact that they could come back, be here, and then go. I just found that perspective to be interesting.
Yeah, it is, and again, I think it speaks to the seriousness that they're taking the goal. That was always what was interesting about bowl games, is that it was part there to win a game, part there to have a good time, and now it's all business, and you know how regimented these guys' schedules are. Really throughout the whole year, but especially in season. And to be able to have that routine in familiar surroundings, and then we get on a plane and we aren't on the ground that long, and then we come back and we do it again for the next opponent is good. And I do like the fact that there's a little bit of time in between the games, that it's not, in many cases a straight week. You get maybe 8-9 days, and obviously, unfortunately, that was a longer or a shorter turnaround for Notre Dame because of what happened in New Orleans. But ideally, they would have had 8 days to prepare and 9 days for Penn State. So you're getting more than a week to get ready for your next game.
That's a really good point. Adam, an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, as always. You know how much I respect your work.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. Thanks for having me on. Great to be with you.
The outstanding Adam Rittenberg, ESPN, ESPN.com. You just look. That's the category of the consummate pros pro, Adam Rittenberg. That's how much I respect him. All right, back with more in a moment. Brought to you by Purdy Insurance on News Radio 1070 WKOK.